Mixing with Mike, plugin of the week comes from Waves. It's the SSL EV2. The SSL E-channel Shootout is what I'm calling this video, and I'm calling it that because do you really need another E-channel? And so this is something that you have to consider, and I thought the best way of looking at it would be to do a shootout between what I think are the next two main competitors for those who have the UA system, who may be more inclined to use the SSL E channel there if they have a significant amount of processing power available with their satellites. The Brainworks on the left, their SSL 4000 E channel, what they came out with a couple of years ago. And this is a recently release, EV, similarly meaning EV2 or V2, SSL E version 2, because they've had one that goes back, I don't know, 12 or 15 years from this video. So that's been out for quite a while. So what's different? Well, primarily they've done better preamp emulations. You can drive the mic preamp that way. Has an analog circuit that allows you to add in the harmonic distortion characteristics and all of that, very much like many of their other plugins. -20 pad, all of that sort of stuff. Has the usual suspect type of things. Not a lot of extra bells and whistles. Just a bypass. Channel out just puts the dynamic section after the EQ. That's just like the switch on the original console. Otherwise, pretty straightforward. All the compressor settings, fast attack, all that sort of stuff. The expander exactly the way that it was. Could be a gate or an expander. The filters having a split function on it, right? So that puts the filters directly after the mic preamp, line preamp, right? So that would be first in the circuit, and then with this signal flow, you would have dynamic section and then the remaining EQ section. If that's out, then the filters are actually after the 4-band EQ, which is on the right. Otherwise, we have the full EQ. As expected, it has a bypass switch right in the middle. It has a feature, one added feature, whereas you select frequencies, it will allow you to solo in on the frequency that you're working with. And they added in the brown knob, black knob. Now, the brown knob was the original SSL E-Series EQ going back to the 70s. So the E-Series console, I believe, came out in 78. It was late 70s. Later, in the mid-80s, they added a black knob version of the EQ. So you wouldn't have to change anything out of your console. The console is modular. So you would lift out the channel strip, which is just 2 screws, pop it out. One screw removes the card, right, that holds the card onto the motherboard. Just pop it out of its edge connector, pop the new card in, change the little plastic caps to a black colored knob, and you have a black knob EQ. It's really that simple. And it does sound different. So it's not just the low frequency shelf bell, that is changed. The whole EQ does sound different. There's a different characteristic sound to it. And we'll go over that a little bit of that. So that's the primary thing. They have the old plastic VCA output, right? Later with G series, they came out with a moving fader version of their software called oh, wait a minute. Oh my God. Like all of a sudden spacing on the name. It was not Total Recall was the software that they used so you could take a picture of the console, and then they came out with Ultimation, which was their moving fader software. Sorry for the space out there. There's also a way here to add a little width, so there's some width processing. You can kind of work with it that way, and you could filter that width processing. So I think this is more like S1 type of technology that they have from their other plugins. That's the only addition there. So when you go to the other versions, the actual SSL from Universal Audio is very true to the original, and the Brainworks is with some added feature like a high-pass filter, a secondary release control on the dynamics, things like that they've added in. Giving you the ability to go to a G or an E on the dynamic section, which sounds slightly different from each other. They both also give you black knob, brown knob features, right? So you have those capabilities. And then the TMT technology is added in on here. So some similar things. And probably the best way to get a sense for what each one does, let's have a listen to it, talk a little bit about it, So these are just things I have here, right, on the stem. I'm just going to deactivate those. And let's just take a look at the SSL E-channel strip first. So what I have here is a demonstration. I'm just going to play a little bit here with no processing. So what I've done here is I've taken, and I started with the SSL EV2 and the Waves version, and I went through and I did a full compression equalization, basic stuff. I tried to keep the mathematical numbers to easily replicatable numbers. Like I think I just nudged that one. I just blew the whole thing up. So I keep it exactly 3 dB. Did my best to match all of the settings. It's a little bit more difficult with the universal audio version because it doesn't show numbers. Did my best by eye or ear. They all sound very different from each other. One thing to be careful about, there's not one sound for an E-Series console or any other console. They all sound a little bit different from each other. No two are manufactured exactly the same. They don't all end up being the same. Just like you can buy the same model car, consecutive serial numbers, one will drive great, one will be a lemon, next one down the line. Things like that happen. So the quality of the console that the manufacturer gets to emulate plays a major factor in the quality of the emulation, not just the technology or the way that they present it, right? All the other bells and whistles are whatever the company decides to do. They each have their own technologies that are proprietary. Some are better than others. You can decide based on listening. So let's just play a little bit, no EQ or anything. Here we go.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable.
All right, and now I'm going to play the same thing, and this is the processing with the SSL EV2 from Waves. Here we go.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable.
Right, so nice depth and clarity. Classic Waves emulation. Waves has a certain sonic characteristic to their emulations that are consistent and accurate, and I've always loved them for that. There's a great consistency with their plugins, and they keep them for a very long time. They going all the way back to the beginning. They never seem to let any of them go. So good to see an update of this, though. It's long overdue. All right, so that's good. I like the low end. It's got a little bit of extra oomph down on the bottom. All right, let's go now to check out, this is the Brainworks SSL E, and this is the more recent one from a couple years ago that's SSL approved. Here we go.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable.
Little bit warmer sounding, a little bit got a bit more depth to me, I think, than the EV2. That's a bit of what I'm hearing. Seems to be a little bit more pronounced in the mid-range, which to me is a definite characteristic of common characteristic of an SSL console. Now let's go to the UAD version of this. Again, so this is the one that is sort of the wild card because I'm doing my best to sort of match settings here, but it has a very distinctively different sound. So check this out.
Latch onto this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable.
All right, so what's interesting here with this is that the low end is less defined. The high frequencies almost seem over-defined. Very, very bright, and it seems like there's a lot more compression going on than what the meters would suggest. So I went carefully through all of these, feeding tones in, trying to get the thresholds to match so that if I put a tone in and I got the threshold to just trigger the 3 dB LED, I would try to get it to do that on all of them and kind of follow. Now, what was interesting about this is that comparing them side by side, they didn't always exactly match up. The other thing that was a little bit troubling was, and this is also a characteristic of the console, is the makeup gain. There's an automatic makeup gain on the compressor. So it took a little while to really go through everything and try to match up the gain of the output. It feels like there's a lot more compression going on with the SSL UAD version than there is with the other two. So now I'm going to do them a little bit more in rapid succession and go back and forth between them. And I'll try my best here to kind of do it and display the one that I'm doing. So the top one is the Waves version. The middle row here is the Brainworks version, and the bottom one is the UAD version. All right, so here we go.
Legends of the sinking ship dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable.
No, sorry, I should do a quick switch faster. Sorry.
Legends of the sinking ship dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable. Reconcile with hopes of change. It claws away at my carapace. This semblance of tenderness. Surprise yourself with all I have.
I knew I would do that sooner or later. A little spastic here, sorry. So anyway, if you kind of go through that, you can hear some distinctive differences. I think the EV2, right, the Waves version and the Brainworks version are more similar, and the UAD seems to be out on the reservation of its own. And it's hard to understand exactly where that comes from, or if there's some sort of thing in there that makes it like it's just a natural byproduct of the technology, or again, it just happens to be the console that they've used. Now, this has the solid state logo on it. That must be part of their original deal. Brainworks got the solid state logic logo on it, and Universal Audio got the solid state logic logo on it. So whatever licensing deals they put out to put their name on it, it's obviously sometimes the companies will do exclusives. Universal Audio is usually very good at capturing those kinds of things, and Waves is also quite good at some of those sorts of things, particularly with the Abbey Road stuff. But there's a lot to kind of take in from both of them, and this doesn't even get into some of the technology here that would be added in here. So in other words, if I just went in and go ahead and do the TMT thing, this changes the formula here for this.
Legends of the sinking ship dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable. Away at my carapace, this semblance of tenderness.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's some hype. The other thing that I found consistently is that whatever console that Universal Audio did has more makeup gain built into it. On the actual card itself, it does have a tweak pot for the automatic makeup gain on the compression. and they never line up perfectly. There's sort of a midway point where if you get more or less about 3 dB of gain reduction, you get something that closely resembles unity gain. I think that's meant to be the calibration point, but if you go much more than that, then the makeup gain won't follow as efficiently. So there's a little bit of a thing there. So I just want to do one other quick thing here and not make this, if I've already made it long and drawn out here, I'll do my best to sort of keep it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch everything to the brown knob here so we could see this. Let me just open up a couple of other things, make sure they're all brown knob. All right, so I have to be very careful with this here. And let me do a similar thing here. EQ type brown knob, EQ type brown knob. All right, so just make sure that those are all right. And a similar, so I'm doing this with a grouping function in Pro Tools, but mono and stereo tracks don't group together with plugins. It's just one of those weird buggy things that they do. All right, but we have the feature, so now I'll turn it off before I blow anything else up, because if I touch anything else, it's a mess. All right, so now let's do this and do a brown knob shootout, make it quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Here we go.
Legend to this sinking ship, dilute me into a state of bliss. Offer me some peace and kind, rectify my inconsolable. Fool attempts to throw you away. I've reconciled with hopes of change. It claws away at my carapace. This semblance of tenderness. Suffice yourself with all I have. I'm fill your world with dreams of glass.
And I'll leave it with that. So to give you just a good idea, I actually, in this case, I think I kind of like the brown knob a bit better. Also doing the TMT seems to change the gain structure a little bit that I carefully set up, so it kind of made it louder going through, so that's also something that's in there. But I do really love what that does in terms of adding like a depth to its modeling. And just that slight variance with the concept, which is actually true, that no two channel strips are exactly alike. There's always some variance built in with all of the components and everything, and they modeled that into a technology itself. Still very good. The new SSL version of this, I was tempted to put in the CLA Mix Hub, which I believe is also an E-Series emulation, but it doesn't have all the things, and it kind of flips in an 1176. I believe they also said that they did a brand new emulation for that as well, so I'm not exactly sure how they did that, but obviously the 1176 technology doesn't fit into that. So thought that might be a little bit of a wild card, but it's actually quite a good emulation. Do you prefer it better? I think that's kind of up to you to decide. You could hear a distinctive difference between them, and then maybe the added features are what makes a difference, or maybe you got a better sale price at Solid State Logic. You're not going to go wrong with it. It's actually a very good emulation, and just straight up putting it up and starting to work with it, it's like, okay, this sounds and feels good. Exactly what I would expect from Waves. All right, there you have it. Our quick shootout. A little bit different from what I normally do. I'm not going to pick a winner. That's not what I do. I'll let you decide. Plugin of the week: Waves SSL EV2 and SSL E channel Shootout.